Good afternoon and welcome to UMACO TV. My name is Kemal Erkan. I'm the chairman of United Medical ACO and the CEO of United Medical. This is our weekly event, and as usual, we go through some of our revenue cycle management updates and also clinical presentations, as well as we discuss global issues, US economy, and also healthcare news. And just recently, we started a political series for Delaware for election year 2024. And our first guest last year was Colin Davis, who is challenging, one of the challengers for the Congress. And we'll continue those sessions with other confirmed guests. Next week, we are going to have Matt Myers, who is the Newcastle County executive running for governor race for Delaware, and he will be joining us next week. Now, today is the turn. Today's turn is for the RCM. So we are going to have two of our client managers going to join me, and I want them to just turn their cameras on. So Dora, Beasley, and John Rocco, JR, we call him. So they are two of our payment posting client managers on the RCM team. As you guys are familiar with the format now, that part of the some of our sessions, some of our episodes, we use it for employee education and also for client communication. So this would be the part that we are going to do with JR and Dora. So I'm going to let them give access, both of them first introduce themselves, and then they can actually start the session from their side.
Hello, everyone. This is John Rocco. I've been with United Medical since September 2013. I started as a payment poster, team lead, and then a client manager. Very happy to be here as part of the RCM team. Although I must say I'm a little nervous to follow the state treasurer last week. So I'll do my best.
Hello, my name is Dora Beasley, also a client manager here at United Medical. I have been with United Medical since December of 2014, coming up on 9 years. And I started as just a payment poster as well, worked my way up to client manager, and I'm also very happy to be here and very nervous as well.
Remember, I started as a payment poster as well, so it's a good start. So I think you'll be fine. So let's go ahead and start with the presentation.
I am unmuted and you guys can see my screen, correct? Okay, excellent. So in front of me are the core responsibilities of our payment posting department. Let's go down the list, starting with the lockbox and correspondence. We'll be going into further detail with these later on. But lockbox and correspondences are, a lot of these are very straightforward. So lockbox will be a mail that holds all the incoming EOBs, letters, different patient statements, and it's processed by the provider's bank account. The correspondences are non-payment items, and our payment posters will retrieve the, there's different ways to retrieve this information, but this is going to be the first part of your day as a payment poster, is to retrieve all of this information from the several websites and portals that we use. Bank reconciliation is actually the next slide, but this process involves working directly with the provider's bank account. The electronic posting workflow is the majority of our workload, and in this age, everything that we do is electronic. And we use two systems, which is SPM and CPM, and we'll get into that again. Manual posting is the when I started, it was still a big part of our workflow, but this is where we key in data manually. And then service requests is a workflow that we use to communicate with the provider and several of our RCM coworkers. Let's go to the next one. All right. The reconciliation process. So what is this? My slide says this is the process of matching the balances in the practice management system to the corresponding information in the bank account. So what does this mean? Well, our team, when we have access to United Medical Clinic's bank account, our workflow is to go into the daily deposits. We'll download the days and the previous day's statements to make sure that we have all the deposits. We'll save that file and upload it into our QuickBase portal. And what this does is it creates a work queue for our team. In this case, if we have a Medicare check for today, it'll be on QuickBase and we'll see whether or not it's been posted, or if we're missing an EOB for it. If we have any system issues from Medicare, we'll make note that Medicare is delayed. Also, if somebody is not in the office for that day, we can reroute that work queue to another person in our team. So when we upload this into QuickBase, this will result in a confirmation log for the provider's accounting team. So at the end of the month, we can send the entire deposit log for the month of July to our providers and say, we posted this much electronically, we posted X amount manually. If there's anything missing, we'll be able to account for that difference once we run the practice summary reports. I did go over this one, ability to redistribute volume. I skipped this one, reporting for unposted EFTs. Again, if there's a delay, we'll be able to see that and have an alert go out to our team. There's also this fourth bullet that says anticipating check deposits from electronic remits. So one of the best things I like about the reconciliation process is if we're getting money and not receiving that information to our clearinghouse, we'll be able to say that this needs an electronic remittance advice enrollment, or we need to go to the payer portal. We'll need to go into United Healthcare, take this information and key it in. And then providers like this last one, it's a financial safety net for separation of duties. So that means when we have bank reconciliation, there'll be other employees in charge of different parts of the financial process or the revenue cycle process. So for example, Dora and I will route the incoming money into Blue Cross, for example, instead of Blue Cross sending the check to the provider's office, where there could be, several hands that could get in the way of that check being cashed. Okay, let's go into the electronic posting workflow. So now that we understand where our daily workflow goes, let's look at the electronic posting, and it starts at the doctor's office. When I see Dr. Valencia, we'll have my charges entered in SPM. We'll go through the United Medical System verification, and then I have my claim sent out to the insurance. So the part where Dora and I come in are the established connection with the clearinghouse and the insurance. So in our ERA and EFT, so electronic remittances and electronic funds transfer, if we have that established with the payer and the clearinghouse, then that means they'll send it back to us electronically. Okay, and then from there, the claim will be accepted. They'll generate an 835 file, and then our team will go in to SPM and process those remits. There's the rest of the RCM workflow. If there's any patient responsibility, of course, the patient will receive a statement. If they have a secondary insurance, it'll go to the secondary payer. If there's anything that's denied or partially paid, our accounts receivable team will work these claims, send it back to the insurances, and then the process will start over right here with the insurance and clearinghouse connection. More into the electronic posting workflow. We did mention that our ERAs, our 835 files, are received through the electronic data interchange. So at the end of the previous slide, we did mention that this impacts the other forms of the RCM cycle. So accounts receivable will work those denials. Our claims team will send out the claims, and then our statements will go out to the patients. And what else? Payment posters will process non-payments. So your deductibles, your zero pays, your capitation will be processed by us. We're in charge of entering the COB information, which is the coordination of benefits. We'll process any online patient payments as well. And then using our 7-day posting report, we're able to monitor the activity for each day's electronic posting. All right. So back into our other workflow, our manual posting workflow. It's the same thing. I'll go to the provider's office. They'll see if I have insurance, and the claim will go out. So the difference here is if the payer and the clearinghouse do not have that relationship where the provider has permission for the payer to send back the claim electronically, then we can still send them out through Trizetto, but the way they'll come back to us is through a manual EOB. And manual is just a blanket term. There's several ways we can receive this, which we will go over again. But once we receive this information, we'll key it in through SPM, and then it's the same thing. Any patient responsibilities here will go out to the patient's statements, and then our team will upload any PDF files that we scan in and archive to the EOB workflow portal. Okay, and then our accounts receivable team will also handle any denied or partially paid claims. More into manual posting. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have an electronic lockbox, which is highly recommended for practices with high volume. An electronic lockbox usually contains a PO box, so your smaller insurances will mail in everything through one address. It relieves the provider's office of a lot of paperwork. Usually with an electronic lockbox, if you have this service, they will scan all your data for you. So not only will they deposit any patient payments that are mailed in via check, they'll take your EOB, scan it, and then upload it to your bank's portal. From there, you'll have a digital archive of everything that's mailed into you. How do we manage the manual posting? Well, we have a 7-day manual posting report as well. Our manuals consist of things that we physically receive in the mail, things that are faxed from our providers' offices, our Cerner secure file transfer portal, service requests between the providers' offices, our accounts receivable team following up on claims and providing us with that EOB. And then, of course, when we see things from our provider's bank account, we go ahead and retrieve the EOB from these several portals, and that's how we post those manual payments as well. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. So Dora, you can go ahead from here.
Thank you, JR. So what you're going to see populate here on the screen are examples of different payer sites that we will utilize on a regular basis to retrieve different EOBs and documents that we need to process payments, or that the accounts receivable team will need to review denials and such. So what you see mostly on the screen are payer hubs that the insurances use to keep all of their payments in one place. For example, ECHO, they house payers such as Health Options, AmeriHealth Caritas, Ameritain, and many more. So that's just a quick example there. Moving on to Trizetto. So just a little background on what Trizetto is. It's our clearinghouse, so that's what we use to send and receive remittances and claims from the insurances that the providers bill. So it provides us with detailed provider analysis, and it communicates payer delays as well. This comes in handy when we're having issues identifying why we haven't received a specific payer in a certain amount of time. For instance, maybe we haven't received any Cigna remits for the past 2 weeks. We can go into Trizetto, and generally there's a message just letting us know that this payer ID is delayed, and we're working on resolving that. In connection with Trizetto, JR and myself utilize the site STEM to initiate payer enrollments that will allow Trizetto to translate the 835 files and the 837 files, which are the claims and the remittances, into our EMR system. So reporting is also a really important part of our workflow and the responsibilities that we have in the payment posting department. We're responsible for running and entering the financial reports for our client invoicing. This includes the practice summary report for SPM. We also are responsible for verifying capitation and incentive payments, and just to make sure that they're posted accurately and documented in our system as well. We also run the accounts receivable reports, so that includes the age receivable manual entry, which that's the outstanding balances during specific timeframes throughout the client's history. And then we also are responsible for entering the average 6-month charge totals, which then will calculate the days in AR for each client. Just some more on the reporting aspect. This is more internal on what we utilize in our department. So we run reports to verify that the pairs are being created in the clearinghouse appropriately. That's that ERA/EFT verification process. We also run the mid-month comparison report. This pulls the totals for the client for the first 15 days of the month and compares them to the previous first 15 days of the previous month. And in addition, we also run the payment and adjustment codes, which reviews the number of line items worked by each payment poster. We also review our documentation drives in our share drive to assure that all the files are received from the clients and that they're stored and worked properly. And lastly, we're responsible for not only downloading, but also merging and uploading the reports retrieved for our end of month procedures. And that's going to include the reports that we discussed in the previous slide, age receivables, practice summary reports. Okay. So we have our benchmarks here. These are our department benchmarks specifically. So our productivity metrics consist of our productivity. So the dollar amount of payments that each payment poster is posting on a daily basis and on a monthly basis. We have the payments per hour. This is going to take those payments and it's going to divide them by the hours that the payment poster has worked. And that's going to give us what we expect the hourly posting rate to be for each payment poster. So basically like the baseline. We have the productivity standard, or the baseline for our productivity, is about 800,000, and it's determined by the level of the employee. So if they're full-time, tenured employees, you know, we want to make sure that they reach that threshold of 800,000. The payments per hour is tracked by the hourly production for each team member by taking their production total, like I said, and then dividing that by the number of hours that they worked. And then we have the payment and adjustment codes. That's the number of line items that each individual will post. And that volume is determined by the total number of individuals. So we take into account the number of employees that we have, and take the overall volume of the department, and that's how we will determine, you know, how much each individual person should be working on a regular basis. Again, payment posting, the payment and adjustment codes, that's just another metric that we use to maintain a balanced workload for each person in our department. And then, of course, we have quality. Making sure that everything is done accurately is really important. The health of the client is what is most important. And by making sure that our department is processing everything correctly, we're maintaining the health of the client overall. So JR and I will conduct routine quality checks using many different workflows throughout our department. And we expect for each individual to meet a 90% or better. And that's all.
Thank you guys. So now, obviously, what you presented is extremely important in our workflow, part of the RCM. As I said, I was one of my first responsibilities, which I did almost for 18 months or so, a little bit different than the way that you guys did. So because we were still utilizing a DOS-based system. You guys know what DOS is? Like, you are still, like, you are not the Gen Z, right? If the Gen Z is watching, I have a room. I don't know why his camera is off, but Sean probably may not know what DOS system, or hasn't seen it, or has not worked in one of them. So as part of my responsibility from the client, from the payment posting, closing the end of month. So that used to be like almost like a 2-day, 18 to 20 hour work. So this is year 2000 and early 2001. We went live with TDS that time in 2001. And we used the old system until end of 2002. So every time you have to close the old system, they close a month, and there were only 2 clients in it, Delaware Cardiovascular and Hospitals of Delaware. And you have to watch just like almost like a babysitter. So if the server goes down, you have to start the process again. Now the problem is you have to set the date on a Friday, because it has to be almost like a weekend test, because everything needs, like, by the time you are done, until you are done, they cannot actually enter new transactions. So then if you didn't close the month, no one would be able to work. So that was not 100 years ago, it's about 23 years ago. So now it's a lot more efficient. It used to take, I used to have a payment poster working with me. I was really fast, but for Medicare EOB, I would spend about 45 minutes. It's like 13, 14 pages from Delaware Cardiovascular. That lady, God bless her heart, but she would spend about 2.5 hours to finish one EOB, and I would still go and help her because she couldn't reconcile the end of it. So that she would always make some mistakes. So you have to go one by one to find where the mistake was. So it was extremely challenging. Now with electronic posting, that challenge is done, but we have other challenges. Getting paid right, getting the payments posted at the right time in a timely manner. Those are all important part of it. And as just unlike any other business, healthcare providers do not get paid at the time of service. And when we get paid, if it's not processed correctly, then we won't have the proper collection flow. For example, if the patient didn't pay copay until the payment posting is completed, we won't know that happened or that didn't happen. If there are co-insurances, if this payment is not posted correctly, Medicare pays only 80% of the allowable, that 20%, which we don't have 20% profit margin in the primary care or the specialist offices. So then if you miss that 20%, if it's not posted correctly, then you miss out on that 20% collection. A lot of insurances, as you know, they have much higher deductibles than it used to be in the past. So then again, if the payment is not dropped to the patient, then you are going to have collection issues, therefore financial issues for those practices. From that point in the RCM cycle, in the revenue cycle, what you do is extremely important, and also we want our clients to understand and our employees to learn from each department what they do and how they do it. And this was a really nice presentation. Thank you for that. Anything you would like to add before we close this part?
For me, when I started in 2013, it was sort of the same process because I was there when we started working with BOS clients. So at that time, the struggle was we couldn't get enough people to do the work because there was so much paper. So more on the struggle now, it's about security and getting access to these several portals that we utilize so that we can get the money on time. We can get it sooner to the provider. We can get the end of month bank statements to match with what the payer is actually sending them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us. So I'm sure you'll be back again. But it's always good to have you guys and you guys participate in this, and knowing that we are also utilizing this as a training, additional training resource. It's really good to have these kind of sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kemal.
Thank you.
All right, so Sean will continue with our regular session.
Something a little bit more familiar with that I can chime in on, sure.
All right, so you also know the revenue cycle management science, right?
Of course, our lunch and learns, I've been paying attention.
So today we want to discuss another important topic that comes up time to time, and questions that we always get. And there are different opinions. There are some group of people, they feel really strongly about it. There are some that they don't, and there are some that are in the middle. And then we are getting some studies recently, because it's not been that long. Mm-hmm. So we are talking about working from home, aka remote working, yep. And the advantages, disadvantages, and also you'll probably hear what my position is. Obviously, we are going to talk about it openly. So Sean and I prepare some discussion points for us.
So as you're mentioning, it is a rather new topic, considering the follow-up from the pandemic. That's kind of what catapulted this push of a lot more employees working remotely. So it's not something that businesses obviously were traditionally utilizing, or that was the same matter that employees were used to doing prior to this pandemic. And I think now it's kind of a unique time, because we know during the pandemic itself, obviously it was more essential to have people for their safety, to be at home. You have their health and safety as the number one priority. So it made sense then. But like I said, now we're in this unique time where I've transitioned out. The state of emergencies have been ended in certain states. I know Delaware is one of the ones that actually extended it for one of the longest times, but I think back in May is when we officially ended that. So this is a unique time where people have to kind of transition back. And we're seeing kind of like that rift where some people, and we're going to actually discuss this a little bit too, but it does vary by generation. And how some people are having trouble accommodating and kind of working from home at the same productivity level and same health, which we're going to discuss that too, the health benefits and actually negative health consequences, you could say. But kind of how the different age groups do handle it differently, and how this is a unique time where it's the first time where we're now going back from we don't need to be at home. So we're trying to dive into some of these aspects that we're covering in this topic.
So well, there are this is a challenging topic, right? So but it's also, some of them are, to me, in my opinion, pretty straightforward. So I start my day from working from home because we have an office in Turkey, and because of the time zone issue, that I started 8 with a case conference, and I have another one at 10. So then by the time I'm done, usually it takes about noonish to be here. But I also put about 14 to 15 hours a day. So where I am doesn't make much difference for anyone.
Every day.
So, but if I were to work only for 8 hours, and then I look at the people's, knowing everyone's home environment, so what they have, who they have, the people don't live by themselves. So it's not like, well, you may live on your own, but many people have families. And if this is for everyone, imagine, like, you kind of need to look at it, whether or not this is doable and if it can be applicable to everyone. Because otherwise, if it doesn't satisfy the majority, then you are not going to make the rules on minority, meaning that if average person married with 2 kids, what they have at home is not an office. Now, we did it in the pandemic, during the pandemic, because we were all thinking that we were going to lose half of the world's population, which we didn't. But as a caution, we did, and we did it immediately. Like, it's not like we are. I can just speak on for myself. I made that decision before the government did here in the state of Delaware. So, like, it was before the state of emergency. However, when we deal with the sensitive information, when there are certain liabilities are not anymore covered by the federal government because they lifted HIPAA, OSHA type of liabilities of the employees. So imagine before HIPAA, and then today HIPAA is so heavy that you couldn't share XYZ, but now you are letting someone working from their kitchen when their spouse is right behind them and the 2 kids are running around. So that's when everyone was dying. We did make that exception as everyone else did. But today is not that. Also, who cannot work from home is another issue. So when you look at the overall population, if I'm not going to be able to, like, the other thing that I want to insert here, United States national debt is record high at 32.6 trillion. So 32.6 trillion. Right before pandemic, that number was 20 trillion. So that's 3 years, 3.5 years. So we are at almost 70%, close to 70% higher, right? Higher than where we were. So that means we have to really realize, I mean, regardless of what Joe Biden says, we have a pretty decent recession out there. I start shopping a little bit and going to some of the public places, and I understand that things are not the way that it used to be. So when we become too comfortable, things may not be the same anymore. Now, to see this at a level, the country level, that may take a little bit longer, but the companies, they have to be more responsible. So we may not be that lucky, and then we may go down in 12 to 18 months if we are not careful, and if you become way too loose and just to relax and just let them do whatever they want to do. However, what we find out is there are other negative results of working from home. And I'll let you take over from after I say what I need to say here. I do believe as a person, the way we developed has a lot to do with the way we do things and how we take care of certain tasks and how we interact. Interaction is not just with your family, but interaction with your friends, interaction with the society, understanding the society. So school, like I'm always against homeschooling because kids are, and I apologize if I'm going to offend anyone, but that's my opinion, and this is this country still have the freedom of speech. I am strongly against homeschooling because that's a disaster for kids. Because kids have to socialize, kids have to make friends, kids have to fail, kids have to be unfair, being treated unfairly. Like they have to develop. That's how we become who we are. So if you isolate them, what happens is they are not able to cope with the society the rest of their life. They will struggle. Are there exceptions? Yes. In fact, one of my assistants was homeschooled. He was the greatest. He was a project assistant. He was one of the greatest kids. If every homeschool would be like him, fine, make it mandatory, but not everyone can do what his family did for him. So, and now we see the depression and mental health issues with these. So, since that is kind of like your specialty, right? From your major.
Yeah, I dabble in it.
You're being humble now.
Well, I'm familiar, yes, with my cognitive science and psychology backgrounds. Yes, we did discuss a lot of both mental illnesses, diseases, but also, as you mentioned, the social interactions and kind of just those type of interpersonal, whether it's communication or interpersonal relationships you have to have. And I know that in any business, being able to communicate effectively is obviously essential to the success. And as you were mentioning, just on the topic of homeschooling, losing out on some of those experiences, you'll see down the line. I know personally, I think that you learn the most through experience. So you have to go through something, and then you get wiser. You take that wisdom away from it. Whereas you're saying, not experiencing the interaction with other kids in a classroom, or like failing, or the pressure of a due date, whereas maybe that's lost if you're being homeschooled, for that example. That is also similar, I was saying, in the workforce. So in the workplace, if you're not in this environment where there's other people also being professional throughout the day, sometimes, as you know, as you mentioned, if you have a family at home, there could be distractions where you have little kids running around, maybe pets needing to go out, needing to be walked. You have these other distractions, as I just said, that could influence and impact your work productivity and also just your focus and the quality of work. So the fact that we're transitioning out of this pandemic, I know, as you just mentioned, the mental illness, that impact of it, we're seeing that according to the studies that we at least researched for today's presentation, seems to be impacting the younger generations much more significantly than those who are older. So I'm wondering, some of the things that would come to my mind is maybe the older generation. So just so you have a kind of a gauge on what we're saying, in the study, they were referring to people aged 55 and above as being older, whereas I think the younger one was 18 to 35.
34, yeah.
34, yeah. So I'm just thinking in my mind, these people have been in the workforce, for 30 some odd years. They've already experienced those interactions. They already know what type of expectations are needed for success. And yes, it will be a different environment working from home for those people. But if you're a younger one, where I'm thinking too, the ones who maybe even had some of their college days were remote, where some of the learning you did was actually all remote, electronic based, where you're taking these classes from home, and then you're getting thrown into the workforce, where I don't think it's necessarily best if you're kind of just thrown to the wolves, or it's saying, oh yeah, log in from home, here's what's needed to be done, get it done, and you're not sure like how does the office work? Like, what is that expectation? How do people rely on each other? What's that cohesiveness? And I think that in turn does impact your mental health, because I know a lot of people think about even today on a Friday, you're going home, it's like, oh, we have to go home for the weekend, get to relax at home. But I think if you're blending those two environments where you're feeling the stress from work in the same place that you want to enjoy like a movie later that night, you might not be able, like that mental impact, to kind of disassociate that stress that you're feeling from work while you're in the place where you're also trying to relax and have your home family time. So I think sometimes that may be contributing to kind of this mental illness impact that the younger generation may be seeing more so. Whereas again, I think the older one, maybe they've already had the in-person experience, so they're actually better able to disassociate those two.
So that's like the study says 55% of the people ages 18 to 34 have mental health issues, versus between ages 55 to 64, that's about 17%. So that 55 to 17%, that's a pretty big number. So huge difference. And I think this, from an unrelated article that I read, how Gen Z is not able to interact or participate on the Zoom calls. Mm-hmm. Because they haven't done anything else before, and they don't know many of these people. If it's a brand new employee, well, you were a brand new employee 2 years ago. Now imagine the time that we spend in person versus how much of those can be really done through Zoom. And also there are certain intangibles that we learn about each other, the way that we prepped for this event, for this program. Yeah. Like all those, I don't believe it can be done through Zoom, like, or through like if we haven't seen each other at all. So the other things that you learn while you are here, also access, like, you know, like if I need something, I'm going to be able to get it from someone, versus now I have to schedule a call because things are happening different way. So, but I think the social interaction part of it is important, and I think there will be more studies probably going to come out of that. And at least that's my opinion.
I would agree, as you're saying there too, on some of those intangibles where even like if you're communicating with your teammates or coworkers on a certain project, even just like you can pick up on tone and body language so much better in person. Or you can tell, oh, maybe he's being sarcastic, or if you're reading that through a screen, you may totally misinterpret like this person's being dead serious, like, you know, whereas the importance, or maybe it's stress, and that tone put on a message can definitely be misconstrued. And again, also you're saying that access where sometimes you're waiting on a Teams message, you know, it's like 20 minutes go by just to see, whereas if they're next to you, you can just get up and walk across, maybe 20 people say, hey, you give me this. It's the level of access is just entirely different, remote versus in person.
And it's something that we need to be able to interact. You know, like the other thing that I see, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago with one of the companies that we work with. Someone who's not watching me, Ashley Hodson, would be calling me during my live session. I don't know why. Hopefully everything's okay at the surgery center. So the issue of not being able to feel connected. So what I was talking about is the group of the vendors that we work, and I see it with the insurance companies, and I hope maybe they're watching it. Like some of them are still working remotely, and then it's kind of like the way that we have with our cameras on, like they don't turn their cameras on, extremely disrespectful. Sometimes asking someone to do that is also kind of like really awkward. So can you please, like, if my camera is on, that means that's how it should be. There's a lot of standards which we discussed this with the telemedicine and others. So it is a pretty problematic issue, and we have to kind of follow through this discussion maybe later on. But the way that we need to also understand is not everything can be done remotely. We understand that there are some flexibility based on what people do and how many hours they work, what they do during that time. So that's all different, open to a discussion. But from our point, especially when we deal with the patient data and patient interaction, and a lot of things are relying on in-person interaction, building a culture of the company, and all that is almost making it impossible to make some permanent changes. So we'll continue this next week. Bariatric Friday will be back at 3 p.m. Dr. Erkan is going to join me, and then we're going to discuss the bariatric surgery types. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. So and we'll be back next week with the with Matt Meyer political series episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.